Hi friends, it's Addie from Riverbend Nature Center. I'm doing my part today by staying at home and social distancing, but still wanted to reach out and talk to you guys a little bit about one of my favorite subjects, fossils. So today I'm going to talk a little bit on how fossils are made, why Minnesota has fossils, and some fossils that I've collected the last past summer to help us look at some examples. So to start us off, what is a fossil? Well, in case you didn't know, fossils are the preserved remains or traces of remains of ancient organisms. Fossils are not the remains of the organism itself, but rather they are rocks. A fossil can preserve an entire organism or just part of one. So bones, shells, feathers, leaves can all be preserved and eventually turned into fossils. Fossils provide clues to what life was like in Minnesota in ancient times. So scientists can use these fossils to help see how dramatically life has changed through time. Fossils also help us to determine the age and the environment in which rocks were formed. So this gives us a great insight to what life was like in Minnesota many years ago before any humans were even here. So how is a fossil made? Well, the traditional method a fossil is made is when an organism from a long time ago dies and is quickly buried in sand, mud, or another type of sediment. And the soft parts of the body, like the muscles, your internal organs, all gets decomposed quite quickly through bacteria. But the hard parts, the bones, the teeth, other organisms have shells, those all get preserved in the rock quite well. The best fossils are found in sedimentary rock formations. So sedimentary rock is actually quite common here in Minnesota, and it is formed when small sediment particles traveling down a river or just across water will just fall to the bottom and slowly accumulate, and time and pressure creates a layer of rock. This is a very slow process, and so you can actually measure time in these rock formations as you go back. So now we know where to find them in sedimentary rock. We know what a fossil is. So why are there fossils in Minnesota? Well, fossils can be found throughout the state. We have some really old ones in the northeastern corner up on the Iron Range, but down here in southern Minnesota, our rocks are found from about 450 million years ago during a period called the Ordovician. So during this time, Minnesota was located about 10 to 30 degrees below the equator. So we were actually a tropical climate during that time. And a shallow sea actually covered most of this region. And so we had a lot of marine organisms living in those waters at the time. So we had corals, bryozoans, brachiopods, clams, snails, slugs, cephalopods, so like your squids and octopus, and even trilobites, which are no longer living, but ancient insects, pretty much. So many of these organisms are still found in modern oceans, but not all of them are. So like the trilobites, they are extinct, but corals, which were found back then, are very predominant now in our modern day oceans. And so I'm going to talk a little bit now about the fossils that can be found in Minnesota. And so these are ones that I have actually collected over the summer, but they were all collected on private land. So if you're interested in starting your own fossil collection, just be aware of where you're collecting and where it's allowed. So state parks and scientific natural areas are not allowed to take fossils or actually anything from, but you can check your county, local, and city parks to see if they allow fossil collecting, and there's more information through the University of Minnesota as well about what kinds of fossils you can find. But just to go over a couple types of fossils with you guys, I'm going to talk about the brachiopods first. I mentioned those a little bit earlier. I showed you this trace fossil that has a brachiopod in it, but they also can look kind of in this weird collection of bits and pieces. And so brachiopods are shelled organisms. Their shell is composed of two unequal sides. They're called valves. So if you've ever seen like a clam before, it has the two sides. The clam's two sides are equal, while the brachiopods are unequal. So just keep that in mind if you see those. These guys usually attach themselves to the bottom of the sea floor, so they just filter feed, so that water runs through these organisms, and they'll take the nutrients right out of the water and use that as their energy. The next really abundant and popular fossil I'll find is called a gastropod. You maybe have heard of those before. Those are our snails. So we have modern day snails, but we also had snails in ancient times as well. And they'll come in a couple different types. We have one that is like in a plane, like a garden hose. And so it's a coiled shell, but it's flat, versus a coiled shell that is in a spiral, kind of like this one. It looks almost like a cone. And you can see we have modern day snails. This is a snail that I found just in Nicollet County shell versus its ancestor spiral shaped fossil. And so these gastropods are our snails. If a gastropod doesn't have a shell, it's a slug. And so without that shell, we don't know a lot about our ancient slugs because there was nothing to preserve that organism. No shell, no hard stuff, just soft, squishy stuff that was decomposed away easily. The next fossil I'm going to talk about is called the Receptacolites. It's a big word, but that's just the genus. Their nickname is sunflower coral, and that's what this guy is. And they're called that because this counterclockwise, clockwise kind of connection kind of reflects the disc florets of a sunflower. But this critter is neither a sunflower nor a coral. It's actually an algae that has a really strong cell wall. And so these guys, they're found in warm, shallow seas like Minnesota was many years ago, but they actually have been found throughout the entire world except Antarctica. So these were very prominent back in the day. They are extinct today. We don't have any living relatives of them today. And the last fossil I want to talk about with you guys today is called a stromatolite. And these are one of my favorites as a biologist because these have a very important role in the Earth's climate. So it kind of looks like just a big rock, the stromatolite is, but this is a special rock structure. They're formed by cyanobacteria that would live on some of the surfaces of this really shallow sea. Cyanobacteria are photosynthetic, so they create their own energy. So they would just be taking in the sunlight and then in the end produce oxygen. These were one of the first living organisms ever found in the fossil record, the oldest one going back to about 2 billion years old. How these are made is that cyanobacteria is living on surfaces of rocks, and they secrete a mucus. And this mucus actually kind of collects sediment. It's sticky, and then over time, just new layers keep forming. So you can see this layer of cyanobacteria on the fossil record. These organisms are responsible for our oxygen-rich atmosphere. So back when these cyanobacteria were living, there was not a lot of oxygen in the atmosphere, so most organisms didn't need that. They are the ones that shifted our atmosphere from an oxygen-lacking atmosphere to an oxygen-rich atmosphere, and then forcing all the organisms that lived during that time to be okay with oxygen. So huge changes were made by this stromatolite, and these are found throughout the world as well. So I hope you guys learned something new. I hope that you guys have a little more interest in fossils, and now with the nice weather are excited to go out and fossil hunt. So check in with Riverbend Nature Center. We're going to have some more programs once we can, getting people back out into the park and hopefully looking for fossils. Thanks for tuning in. Bye guys.